'Tis the season for big budget films. This is the 40 to 45% of all revenue for the year, time of year, between the beginning of May and Labor Day. And so this is when you see the big budget films hit the theaters. And, you know, who knows why anyone goes to one film over another, but something we talked about on the early edition of Bloomberg West is that this installment of the Fast and Furious franchise got some pretty good reviews. That's sometimes all it takes to get people into the theaters, even though there's a lot of other choices out there these days.
Who
Tech
knew?
devices.
Right, that the sixth edition in a franchise would get so many viewers. You know, obviously a lot of people saw the movie over the weekend.
Yeah.
But how much money does it take for the studios to make money off of this? When do they know that they've turned a profit?
It's pretty amazing that when you're willing to spend $150 or $200 million to make a movie that you don't necessarily know when you're going to make your money back. But that's the reality that Hollywood lives with, because they've got this process of windowing. It goes from the theaters, which is the prime marketing opportunity and sometimes sets the stage for when you're at home watching on demand, and eventually on Netflix watching Arrested Development one day and maybe one of these other movies the next. So sometimes you don't know the full story until then. And take Fast and the Furious, a movie that has The Rock. Does he get a percentage of the film outside of what's part of that big 150, in this case $160 million budget? So those things Hollywood doesn't share. We also know that they're finding ways to make up for basically flat attendance by boosting prices these days. 3D films, IMAX are a great way to do it, but even just adjusting for inflation.
So it was a big weekend. How do we know if it's going to be a big summer?
So if you see $4.5 billion in box office sales, you can assume that's a pretty good summer. And that seems like a big number, but keep in mind that you could see upwards of 200 films during this key summer period. So, you know, do the math on that. If there's 200 films that are generating in the neighborhood of $20 million, that would be pretty good. And you've got already on paper about 20 films that could be set to generate more than $100 million at the box office. So it will be a big year, but again, with those price increases, that certainly helps the overall box office number.
So any other movies in particular that we should be watching out for?
Well, you talked earlier about the fact that Iron Man 3 has been a big hit overseas, and we shouldn't forget to include that in the conversation. When you were making a movie for the summer now, you were thinking about which ones are going to do well around the world, so you're often picking characters that everybody knows. In the case of Disney, through Marvel and Iron Man, they picked one that everyone's pretty familiar with, but Superman is coming back with Man of Steel. So I think the big characters that have global appeal, that can boost the numbers around the globe, are the ones to watch very closely.